Something I've seen as a relatively popular meme online in certain communities is replacing the Arrowverse with a Marvel version of it, with The Flash replaced by Spider-Man being by far the most common use of this meme. I've also gotten some comments asking me to make a video doing something like this, and so that's what I'll be doing. This video can be considered a companion to a video I made previously called What If the MCU Was As Poorly Structured as the DCEU, where I looked at a hypothetical world where the MCU was the MEU instead, or the Marvel Extended Universe. In this same world, 1 year before the MEU started, the Hawkverse began, with most shows airing on the CW, which isn't a joint effort between CBS and Warner Brothers, but rather CBS and Walt Disney. Year 1 of the Hawkverse goes from 2012 to 2013 and has one season, just Hawk Season 1. Okay, so obviously the character I decided to go with as a counterpart to Green Arrow is Hawkeye, which is the obvious choice, seeing as they're both the resident archers of their universes. But beyond that, they're also both very early recruits for the main superhero teams of their universes, and they both have prominent romantic connections to another hero. Hawkeye isn't a perfect counterpart though. He has a much more limited supporting cast, rogues gallery, and comic stories to pick from. Doesn't really have a definitive base location, and the backstory really doesn't match up, which is important since 5 seasons of Arrow had origin story flashbacks. For that reason, I did consider others like Iron Fist, who, like Oliver, wears green, is rich, and was stranded somewhere where he was trained. I also considered Daredevil, who did kind of start a TV universe in real life, has a similarly sized rogues gallery, and was kind of Green Arrow's counterpart in the MEU video. Ultimately, no character fits perfectly for any character in the Arrowverse, but Hawkeye fits the best. Arrow made some drastic changes to Green Arrow's lore anyway, so we're going to be changing Hawkeye's lore as well to better fit the Arrowverse. Hawk Season 1 has a dark and gritty tone with a lot of relationship drama, focusing on Clint Barton becoming a vigilante, first called the Vigilante, and later in the season called the Archer. Set in Brooklyn, New York, which was where he lived in the most famous and beloved Hawkeye run. Marvel has the unique characteristic, as opposed to DC, of basically everything taking place in New York, as opposed to the scattered around the US and in fictional locations of DC. And so for that reason, basically everything in the Hawkverse will take place in New York, unless the character lives somewhere else in the comics. Aside from Clint, Hawk Season 1 has an extensive cast, all of whom have their differences from the comics. Barbara Morse is a lawyer and Clint's ex-girlfriend. Clint cheated on her with her sister Sarah Morse, who seemingly died on a trip with Clint to Asia. Their father is Quentin Morse, the police captain of their area. Clint's best friend is Tommy Cross, whose father is William Cross, later revealed to be Crossfire, the main villain of the season. Tommy dies at the end of the season, while William is seemingly killed by Clint. Clint has a sister named Kathy Barton, a loose adaptation of Kate Bishop, and his mother Edith Barton is around as well. Obviously, Hawkeye is not rich like Green Arrow, but, well, Kate Bishop is. And like how Mia Dearden was made Oliver's sister and then also his daughter, the same will be true for Kate Bishop in this universe. You might have assumed Kate would be the equivalent to Roy Harper, but Kate is a relatively new character. Roy has been around for just as long as Oliver, and so for that reason, Roy's counterpart will be Hawkeye's original partner in the comics, Black Widow, debuting in this season as just Natasha Romanoff for now. And that leaves the rest of what would be known as original Team Hawk, starting with John Diggle, who is an original character, so his name can stay the same, but actually it won't because both names are important. Diggle comes from Andy Diggle, a Green Arrow writer. Taking that idea, the character will now be known as John Fraction, named after Matt Fraction, writer of the most beloved Hawkeye run I mentioned earlier. The name John is important as well, since it led to Diggle kind of being the Arrowverse's version of Jon Stewart. So I looked at any possible black, military background Marvel superheroes, and came up with Blue Marvel, whose name is Adam Bashir. So Clint's bodyguard turned best friend will be named Adam Fraction. He's motivated partially by the seeming death of his brother Matt Fraction, killed by Whiplash, a recurring villain in the season. As for Felicity, she's not an original character, being Firestorm's stepmother in the comics. Yeah, spoiler alert, Firestorm's equivalent will be the Iron Fist, who doesn't have a stepmother, but does have a mother who will never appear in this universe. It's weird, but at this point the show didn't know it would blossom into an entire universe, so it introduced Heather Duncan. The list aspect of the season can remain intact because it was an original idea, while flashbacks will show Clint traveling to several locations to train with characters like the Swordsman and Anthony Masters, being his mentors. Clint decided to train and become a vigilante after Sarah's death, for which he felt responsible, which would be a big difference between this show and Arrow. So on Arrow, Oliver got stranded somewhere. Here, Clint deliberately decides to become a vigilante. Year 2 goes from October 2013 to May 2014, and yet again includes just one season, Hawk Season 2. In this season, Clint adopts the name The Hawk, and the main villain is Clint's old mentor, Anthony Masters, aka Taskmaster, with flashbacks showing their relationship being strained, with Anthony going crazy as he is injected by a drug that makes him stronger and gives him the ability to mimic any fighting style. Beyond that, Sarah Morse returns, revealed to be alive, having received training from the 10 Rings organization. Sarah joins Team Hawk as Mockingbird. Parallel to that, Clint and Barbara's romantic connection is completely abandoned in this season in favor of Heather Duncan, who the audience had a strong reaction to in season 1. Natasha is injected by the same drug as Taskmaster but is cured in the end, as is Taskmaster, but not before he kills Edith Barton, Clint's mother. And Crossfire is revealed to be alive and is revealed to be Kathy's father. Finally, the season sets up a spin-off show. In the 8th episode, a character named Peter Parker debuts at around 16 years old. He learns Clint's identity, uses his scientific knowledge to save Clint's life, and even makes Clint a mask for him to wear. In the end of episode 9, Peter would be bitten by a radioactive spider. In episode 20, Bobby Drake and America Chavez, the equivalents of Caitlyn and Cisco, would appear and be chased by Taskmaster, and they would also mention MJ. The Hawkverse truly becomes a universe in year 3, going from October 2014 to May 2015, starting with the Hawk Season 3. Natasha debuts as Black Widow, but actually leaves the show at the end of the season. Clint and Heather start officially dating. Sarah is killed by Kathy, who was trained and then brainwashed by her father, Crossfire. This connects to the main villain, the Mandarin, and the 10 Rings. Clint faces the Mandarin in a 1 versus 1 fight, but is seemingly killed only to be brought back by a woman from his 3rd year of training, Quanon, aka Psylocke. In his absence, Barbara Morse debuts as the 2nd Mockingbird, having been trained by a man named Karnak. Clint returns only to be offered to replace the Mandarin as leader of the 10 Rings. He accepts, becomes Ying, which is Chinese for the Hawk, but turns out this was all an act. He turns against the Mandarin and kills him. After that, Clint and Heather retire and drive off into the sunset, leaving Mockingbird, Adam Fraction, and Kathy Barton, who is now called Hawkette, to continue the fight. Airing at the same time would be The Amazing Spider-Man Season 1, focusing on a now 17-year-old Peter Parker as he becomes Spider-Man, with episode 1 adapting his origin with the change that the spider put him to a 9-month coma, and with MJ being his old friend who he's always had a crush on, although she's currently dating Harry Osborn. As previously alluded to, the equivalents I went for Vibe and Killer Frost are Iceman and America Chavez, as they have similar powers, debuted as teenagers in the comics, and the former has a history of being Spider-Man's friend in adaptations. They would all be students at Horizon High in Season 1 while working closely with Horizon Labs, including its owner Norman Osborn, who then becomes the Green Goblin. Norman is revealed to connect to Peter's backstory. It's revealed that his parents were killed for their connection to Oscorp, and Oscorp created the spider that bit him. Along the way, Spider-Man also fights a lot of iconic villains like Dr. Octopus, who appears 4 times, with every episode having Sinister in the title, but Dr. Octopus and the Sinister Six will never be the main villains of any season of Spider-Man. Other villains appear as well, like everyone you see on screen. Throughout the season, a teenager named Danny Rand appears, having become the Iron Fist, and is also a love interest for America Chavez. Harry Osborn dies at the end of the season, helping defeat his father as well. And that brings us to the first of the annual crossovers, with the first one titled Spider-Man vs. the Hawk. In this crossover, Clint follows a killer named Boomerang to Queens, which is where Spider-Man operates. Peter is then whammied by Mindworm, leading to a fight between the two heroes which ends in a draw, and Peter going back to his senses. In part 2, Peter goes to Brooklyn just because he wants to help take down Boomerang, meeting the rest of Team Hawk along the way. Over on NBC, a Blade show begins that doesn't last past 1 season, and in it, honestly, it's not that important, so I guess whatever happened in the first Blade movie or whatever happened in the Blade series happened here. Year 4 goes from August 2015 to May 2016, starting with a very short animated series on the CW Seed channel, Photon Season 1, in which Monica Rambeau learns she has light powers as she inherited. Hawk and Spider-Man both appear for a bit as well, but the entire season is half an hour long. In Hawk Season 4, Clint returns to Brooklyn and now finally goes by Hawkeye. Black Widow returns for 1 episode, and the season goes for a more lighthearted tone, but the execution is pretty bad, and this becomes the worst season. In episode 1, a flash forward this time shows someone will die, which then turns out to be Mockingbird, or Barbara Morse, killed by the main villain, Donald Pierce, who in this world has magical powers and a past with the Mandarin, as they are sworn enemies for like hundreds of years. Clint ends up killing him using some temporary magical powers to do so. In this season, Clint and Heather get engaged, but then also break up. Adam starts going by Guardian, and Heather starts going by Overwatch. I haven't mentioned it until now, but during seasons 2 and 3, Valentina Allegra DeFontaine appeared frequently, having created a group called the Thunderbolts, which was used as a test to see if people would like the idea. They did. Disney put a movie into production and ordered Hawk to get rid of the team. So Whiplash, who was a member, died in season 3, and Allegra is killed in this season. Photon and Blade each appear in one episode in this season, and on the flip side to Barbara's death, Sarah returns to life, setting up a shared spin-off between Hawkeye and Spider-Man. Speaking of Spider-Man, The Amazing Spider-Man Season 2 focuses on Peter getting the symbiote suit, losing it, Venom being created, and the two fighting each other, ending with Venom's death, but not before he manages to kill Aunt May. In episode 1, Danny Rand is confirmed to have died because of the cliffhanger from season 1, which is whatever it is, and then Ward Meachum becomes the new Iron Fist, setting up the same shared spin-off. There is also a Doc Ock focused episode that actually partially redeems him to set up that spin-off as well. Bobby Drake and America Chavez both learn that they are mutants, both developing their individual power sets. America's powers open up the multiverse, although it plays a much smaller role here compared to The Flash. Black Cat appears in the season, but only briefly. She and Peter date for a few episodes, but midway through the season, she leaves the show and she never returns. Peter and MJ then start dating at the end of the season. Throughout the season, Spider-Man has a few villains that he fights, including one alternate universe version of Black Widow named Widowmaker, who then goes on to appear on Hawk, and also villainous alternate universe versions of the show's characters. Midway through the season, Norman Osborn mysteriously returns to life, now without his goblin persona. He then becomes a supporting character going forward, until he goes back to being the Green Goblin. The season ends with Peter, Bobby, America, and MJ all graduating high school, before the reveal that Peter's DNA has been stolen by a villain named the Jackal, and that he was cloned at least once. This year's crossover is entirely focused on setting up the spin-off show called Age of Ultron. The focus is put on Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne as they become Ant-Man and the Wasp, but also Hank creates Ultron, teaming up with the heroes of the Hawkverse to defeat him. They do defeat Ultron, but he is teased to return, and during this crossover, Clint discovers he has a son named Malcolm. When Heather finds this out, she loses it and breaks up with Clint because he didn't tell her the same day that he found out. Before the crossover came out over at CBS, the equivalent to Supergirl will be Captain Marvel. Since, I mean, Carol Danvers, Marvel is a huge downgrade to Superman though, but that does also fit the story, as the series would follow Marvel's death, as Carol goes from Miss Marvel to Captain Marvel, and Superman's equivalent will then also appear in season 2 and would not be Marvel. In this series, Carol will work with SWORD, and specifically its chief scientist and occasional Hulk, Bruce Banner. Although his hulking up is rare and becomes rarer and rarer, Carol has a sister named Alex Danvers, a friend named Rick Jones who was changed to being black, another friend who makes her costume named Samuel Stearns. Both of these friends have a crush on her, but she doesn't ever date either. The villains are the Kree, led by Yon-Rogg, attempting to invade Earth. In episode 17, Spider-Man shows up from another universe, coming through a portal made by America Chavez, who is still learning her powers, so it was by mistake. The duo team up against Diamondback and Titania before Spidey returns to his Earth. And finally for this year, and beginning in 2016, is Marvel's Legends of Tomorrow, because the title is completely original, which begins its first season in a very time travel focused show. Mobius M. Mobius returns from a future where Ultron took over and killed almost everyone, to bring together a team of forgotten heroes to save the future. This team includes Ant-Man, the Wasp, Iron Fist, Sarah Morse, who becomes the White Widow, Doc Ock, Electro, and later they are joined by Vision, created by Ultron. In this season, Doc Ock dies, they destroy Ultron for good and save the future, but not without causing a new mess. Ant-Man and the Wasp leave, but the Legends are then approached by the Wizard, who says he's a member of the Invaders and that they sent him. That brings us to the 2016-2017 season, in which the second and final season of Photon airs on CW Seed, featuring appearances from many Hawkverse heroes and set during the previous season's year before Legends of Tomorrow. This is the final appearance of Monica ever, as while she was set to join Legends of Tomorrow, the actress wasn't available, and so she was replaced by her grandmother. Before that though, we have Hawk Season 5, a return to form for the series, getting back to the darker tone and a far better villain in Bullseye, who seeks personal vengeance on Clint for killing his father during Season 1, and he actually ends up killing himself, which activates a dead man switch that blows up a place filled with people close to Clint that he brought up there in the end of the season, which is a huge cliffhanger for this season. Before that though, the season also shakes up Team Hawk quite a bit. Adam is arrested early on, Kathy retires, Clint and Heather have broken up, and a few new heroes are introduced, namely White Tiger, Hellcat, Black Knight, and Shang-Chi. But with a caveat to each one of these characters. White Tiger leaves the series like in episode 12, Hellcat becomes a villain, joins Bullseye, and then dies. Black Knight's name is Rene Ramirez, which is not his name in the comics, and Shang-Chi is gay, which is also not the case in the comics. Later on, a new Black Widow is introduced named Yelena Belova, and at this point the counterparts have switched a bit, but with Marvel and DC, there isn't always a perfect counterpart. Also appearing in the season is a vigilante named Black Tarantula alongside the DA of the district Hawkeye lives in, who's named Carlos La Muerta, which is Black Tarantula's name in the comics. This was used as a misdirect, as Black Tarantula ends up being an original character, while Carlos ends up being Bullseye. Widowmaker from Spider-Man joins Bullseye, Adam gets out of prison, Clint and Heather get back together, Bullseye then kidnaps Malcolm, which is Clint's son, alongside Malcolm's mother and every single member of Team Hawk, and brings them to the place where Clint trained to become Hawkeye. Clint recruits Crossfire, Boomerang, and Taskmaster, who has recovered his sanity, to help him defeat Bullseye, leading to Crossfire's death and that explosive ending I mentioned earlier, leaving the season on a cliffhanger. In The Amazing Spider-Man Season 3, the Clone Saga occurs. Firstly, Ben Reilly is introduced, revealed to be half a clone of Peter and half the Jackal, so he's played by a different actor, and he soon becomes the Scarlet Spider. Then there's a female clone of Peter who calls herself Jessica Drew and becomes Spider-Woman. Peter also comes across Madam Web a few times starting this season, and the villain of the season is Raptor, who has a slightly different design that covers his entire face. And it's then revealed that it is Kane, the first attempted clone of Peter, who came out deformed both physically and mentally, and so was discarded by the Jackal, but managed to survive. Also in this season, Bobby fully becomes Iceman, Scarlet Spider is convinced to join Raptor at one point, but betrays him in the finale. Spider-Woman goes to operate and live in a different borough, only to return every so often in the series. Peter and MJ get engaged in a musical crossover episode with Captain Marvel, which features the Hypno Hustler as the main villain, and a cool moment of Iceman and the Hulk teaming up. Finally, Peter loses his powers in the finale, leaving Ben Reilly to be the main Spider-Man, but don't worry, that will only last one episode. In Captain Marvel Season 2, Rick Jones becomes the Falcon. She-Hulk appears and is Jennifer Walters, but is unrelated to the Hulk, and weirdly enough, Bruce and Jennifer have a short romantic connection. The first two and the last two episodes of the season feature this world's version of Captain America as an equivalent to Superman. Cap will be considered the world's primary hero and has been for 15 years. He doesn't appear for a while after this season though. The season also introduces the Shi'ar Empire and the Imperial Guard, specifically Gladiator, who becomes the main love interest for Carol, and then he goes against his mother Queen Rhea, who's the main villain of the season because she was an original character, so no change. Other Imperial Guard members will appear in Season 3. Marvel's Legends of Tomorrow Season 2 introduces the Invaders, a World War II superhero team consisting of Wizard, Union Jack, Patriot, Tara, Namor, and Maria Rambeau, aka Photon. Photon joins the Legends, as does Patriot's grandson, Elijah Bradley. The rest of the JSA are purposely scattered around the timeline by the villain of the season, Kang the Conqueror, who also brings together a group of villains to form the Masters of Evil, all from when they were at their villainous peak. Kang dies, and the rest are sent back to their times with their memories erased, but not before killing Wizard, the original Patriot, and Union Jack. The season ends with the Legends finding themselves in another messed up timeline, setting up Season 3. The annual crossover of the season is Secret Invasion, revealing that a few characters have been replaced by Skrulls for a few episodes. Let's say Norman Osborn and Adam Fraction, although ultimately it wouldn't have much of an impact on the shows, just whatever those characters went through a few episodes before the crossover didn't happen to them. Peter has America create a portal to what is now known as Earth 40, with the main world being Earth 616, clearly its own self-contained multiverse. Never called the Avengers, this team is clearly very Avengers inspired. The Hawkverse grows even larger in the 2017-2018 season. Hawk Season 6 starts off by revealing that the only person to die from the explosion is Malcolm's mother, with Adam Fraction also getting injured. The season is split into a few storylines, starting with the hacker Caden James and his criminal cabal being the villains, during which Clint allows Adam to temporarily take take over as Hawkeye, while he helps Taskmaster find his daughter Jean. The second story, starting with Clint and Heather's wedding, involves a civil war between original Team Hawk and new Team Hawk, who start calling themselves the Defenders. They eventually reconcile as they face off against the villain of the season, Wilson Fisk, who remains undefeated by the end. Throughout the season, the FBI go after Hawkeye, leading to him being forced to reveal his identity to the public, and then he's arrested and sent to jail. The Amazing Spider-Man Season 4 has one episode where Ben Reilly is Spider-Man. Peter gets his powers back by the end of said episode in order to save MJ from an android called Ultimo, soon revealed to have been created by the Tinkerer, the main villain of the season, and his wife, a gender-bent version of the Looter. Early on, Scarlet Spider leaves the show, only to be replaced by the introduction of Cloak and Dagger. By the mid-season finale, Tinkerer manages to turn public sentiment against Spider-Man, which alongside other life troubles, lead to him temporarily quitting for a few episodes. During these episodes, the Tinkerer steals all the tech that he made for a lot of other villains in the past back so that he could use them all at once. In the finale, Spider-Man defeats the Tinkerer with help from a newly introduced hero calling herself Silk. Morlun is then teased as the villain of Season 5. Also, the season cements Mary Jane Watson as the leader of Team Spider, which remains true for a few seasons. I also now have to mention Jean the Wolf, who is a police captain appearing since Season 1, romantically involved with MJ's father. She gains telekinetic powers in this season, which starts a snowball effect that leads into basically the worst thing the show ever created. Captain Marvel Season 3 introduces some more members of the Imperial Guard, like Mentor and Oracle. Mentor remains on Earth, while Gladiator and Oracle return to the Shi'ar Empire at the end of the season, joined also by Samuel Stearns, who leaves the show. The villain of the season is Moonstone. Okay, I'll be honest, my descriptions for most shows will get shorter and shorter, because as each show went on, they became way less memorable with each season, and less important things happened. In Legends of Tomorrow Season 3, Mobius is revealed to have created the Time Variance Authority, and the villain is the original character Mollis, who is a demon. Layla Al Fowley is introduced and joins the team, while Photon leaves the team, and Scarlet Spider joins for a few episodes as well. Mobius dies at the end of the season in order to defeat Mollis before the Legends are approached by Blade. During this year, a new show begins on the CW that is initially confirmed to not be a Hawkverse show, Luke Cage Season 1, in which Luke Cage returns to crime fighting after a long hiatus to combat a street gang led by Cottonmouth. He is joined by his wife Jessica Jones. Finally, the second and final Hawkverse CW seed animated series would be called New Mutants Cannonball, which is set on Earth 295, a world where Apocalypse has taken over and killed all of the X-Men who are only referenced. The resistance of this world are the New Mutants, including the likes of Cannonball, Sunspot, Magic, Wolfsbane, Cypher, and Iceman. Cannonball of Earth 295 dies and is replaced by the Cannonball of Earth 616. This connects directly to the crossover event of the season releasing right before, called Apocalypse Wars, in which Peter and MJ's marriage is interrupted by villains from Earth 295 who are after Captain Marvel's heart to save their world's version of Captain Marvel, whose name is Binary, who is a horseman of Apocalypse, alongside that world's version of Clint Barton, who is Bullseye, that world's version of Green Goblin, and Taskmaster. Along the way, some Earth 616 heroes go to Earth 295, where they meet some people like Cannonball, that world's version of Doc Ock, who has become Spider-Man, Samuel Stearns, and Cypher. Iron Fist dies in this crossover. There's a big team-up shot that shows the Avengers kind of in this crossover at the end. The Horsemen of the Apocalypse and Apocalypse are all killed, and the New Mutants return to Earth 295, aside from Doc Ock, who remains and appears on Legends for a few episodes. The crossover then ends with Peter and MJ's wedding being privately resumed, but they're actually joined by Clint and Heather, who hijacked the wedding to get married at the same time. The next season of the Hawkverse lasts from October 2018 till May 2019. In Hawk Season 7, a new Hawkeye shows up who turns out to be Maya Lopez, who then becomes the main villain of the second half of the season as Echo. Before that, Clint spends 7 episodes in prison, which ends with him defeating Wilson Fisk and then getting out. Meanwhile, the season introduces Flash Forward set in 2049, which revealed that Clint and Heather have a daughter named Kate Duncan, who becomes the Hawkeye of the future, along the way meeting older versions of Team Hawk, specifically with the return of Natasha, who has been absent for a while. Then comes the rest of Season 7, with Maya as the main villain, ending with her death and Clint's retirement as he learns that Heather is pregnant. The season ends with Kate's birth and the Watcher recruiting Clint for a mission which will be followed up on with the 8th and final season, and then the crossover of that season as well. Before that, The Amazing Spider-Man Season 5 sees Peter teaming up with Silk as they're hunted by Morlun and the Inheritors for being spider totems, a section of the lore that is introduced here. They manage to defeat Morlun, but he's then replaced by his sister Morsha, but then they defeat her and Green Goblin returns, with the Goblin persona returning as well. Also in this season, a mutant cure is created by Bobby Drake, who gives it to himself. Scarlet Spider returns in one episode, and the next crossover is set up in this season. Captain Marvel Season 4 introduces Kamala Khan, who becomes Miss Marvel. Dr. Doom is the main villain, but mostly from the background. He only appears in 3 episodes and dies. The rest of the season is taken up by the Flag Smasher, a not so subtle political message. From here on out, on Legends of Tomorrow, things become less and less comic book based. The main villain of the season is Morbius because of his connection to Blade. This season introduces Gary Green and Wolfie, 2 Legends originals, so nothing would change. I guess the biggest thing of importance here is that Scarlet Spider leaves this show as well. Luke Cage Season 2 repeats its main villain, but introduces Misty Knight, and that's just about it. New Mutants Cannonball has a second season that is really just a big fight featuring Spider-Man, Hawkeye, and Shang-Chi, but the canon doesn't really line up with the Hawkverse, and Earth 295 is no longer important going forward anyway. The year gets really interesting with the crossover, which is only 3 episodes as opposed to last year's 4, and is titled What If? In preparation for a coming multiversal threat, the Watcher gives a villain named Parker Robbins a reality-altering artifact, which he uses on Spider-Man and Hawkeye, switching their lives. Captain Marvel and Captain America come over from Earth 40, they team up against the Radioactive Man before Cap returns to their Earth. The Hawkverse Trinity then travel to Chicago, where they meet Ironheart, and talk all about Iron Man, a legendary hero who mysteriously disappeared a few years ago. Iron Man also exists on Earth 40, which is referenced. A breakout occurs on the raft with the Molecule Man getting out, but the heroes manage to stop it. And then at the end of part 2, reality changes again. Parker Robbins turns himself into an evil Captain America. Cap then returns in part 3 to help alongside the Hulk and Mentor. A fight then ensues while Clint makes a deal with the Watcher. The Watcher gives him a cosmic arrow he uses against Robbins, disfiguring and defeating him. And then Secret Wars is confirmed to be the next crossover event. And that brings us to the true culmination of the Hawkverse, although it's not the end of it. For this year, each season will be split into 2, before and after the crossover. First off is Hawk Season 8, the final season, the first 7 episodes of which focus on Clint, accompanied by Adam and Black Widow, going to alternate universes and around the world, recruiting people and items that can help them save the multiverse, all with Clint knowing that he's going to die. Over on The Amazing Spider-Man, Season 6 brings a new showrunner who manages to make a compelling 8-episode arc leading up to the crossover, which will become more and more confusing as the series continues, especially with what he ends up doing with the characters introduced here, Anya Corazon and Dwayne Taylor. In this arc, Peter also thinks he's going to die in the coming war just like Clint, and his mortality is paralleled by the villain, serial killer Cletus Cassidy, aka Carnage. Over on Captain Marvel, Season 5 has 8 episodes before the crossover. She finally gets her first new costume. Dr. Doom is brought back to life by the Watcher, the Hulk is also given some sort of trial by the Watcher, which all becomes important later, and the villains are an organization called Zodiac, but that's less important. Luke Cage Season 3 has 9 episodes before the crossover, in which a few new characters who are either adaptations of or are inspired by members of Heroes for Hire are introduced, like Keith Augustin, Martha Cardona, Disco Devil, and the main one being Victor Alvarez, aka Power Man. The villain is Willis Stryker, aka Diamondback. Luke Cage takes place in an alternate universe that is never designated, revealed in this season. Finally, a new show coming off of What If is Ironheart Season 1, which has 8 episodes before the crossover, taking place in Chicago. Riri Williams is joined by James Rhodes, who hasn't yet become War Machine, and the main villain is Demetrius Williams, aka Dune, Riri's father. We'll get back to these seasons after the 2019 crossover, which will be adapting one of the biggest Marvel crossover events, Secret Wars. The crossover adapts Secret Wars, but specifically the 2015 version, which fits perfectly as a counterpart to Crisis on Infinite Earths. In this event, Earths start colliding into each other, with every universe being quickly destroyed, aside for a handful. The Watcher brings together the heroes of the remaining Earths to attempt to stop the incursions by killing the Molecule Men of each Earth, who are revealed to be essentially bombs made by a powerful race known as the Beyonders to destroy the multiverse. At the end of part 1, as the backup plan of evacuating the residents of Earth 40 to 616 goes underway, they fail to kill the Molecule Man, and Clint Barton dies fighting him off, allowing more people to evacuate. In part 2, a whole bunch of attempted recruiting happens across the multiverse. Dr. Doom gains control of the same reality-altering artifact from What If, and uses it to control Raimi's Spider-Man, who is reintroduced in this crossover, to fight Hawkverse Spider-Man. But then he uses the artifact to gain access to the afterlife, where he meets Clint as they confront the Beyonders and convince them to give them some of their powers, as the multiverse is about to come to an end. Doom and Hawkeye manage to use the Beyonders' powers to create a new world out of pieces of all of the remaining worlds, but Doom betrays Clint and takes all the power for himself, becoming king of the new world now called Ladverion, which has a rewritten history. Before losing his powers though, Clint shared a portion of his power with what is now known as the Paragons, which is everyone you see on screen, including Scott Lang, who is really just a regular person. These heroes are the only ones who remember the old world on Battleworld, or Ladverion. The Paragons combine the Beyonders' power to bring Clint back, and then spend episode 4 rebelling against Doom and defeating him. Clint then takes all of the Beyonders' power for himself and unleashes his full power to reset the multiverse, dying in the process. In part 5, the multiverse is revealed to have been restored, with the characters of Earth 40 and Luke Cage's Earth having been rewritten into Earth 616's history. And everything culminates in a final fight with the heroes of Earth 616 going up against the Beyonder, who is revealed to be the being responsible for the end of the multiverse and a renegade of his race, so it's just him, not all the other Beyonders. They defeat him by shrinking him indefinitely, saving the multiverse. Every hero is given their memory of the old multiverse back, and finally, the Avengers are actually officially formed, using Avengers Mansion as a base of operations, with the founders being Ironheart, Hulk, White Widow, Luke Cage, Captain America, Captain Marvel, and the leader being Spider-Man, and Hawkeye is an honorary member. Hawk then has 2 remaining episodes. The first is a backdoor pilot called Hawkeye and the Widows, which fails to take off, while the last episode is the series finale depicting Clint's funeral, and also with the tease for Adam finally becoming Blue Marvel, but that actually never comes to fruition despite him returning several times across the Hawkverse, and it being continued to be teased. For every other show, I'll be honest, things entirely fall off after Secret Wars. Even the bad shows get worse. The Amazing Spider-Man, for instance, becomes really bad really quickly. The rest of season 6 focuses on a gender-bent version of Mysterio named Danielle Burghardt after Quentin Beck appeared in 1 episode during season 3. Scarlet Spider returns for 1 episode as well before the season is cut off by COVID, leaving season 7 to cap off the story. The rest of Captain Marvel season 5 continues to focus on Zodiac, but also Doctor Doom continues to appear, and that's all I got. Luke Cage season 3 continues its storyline, and they defeat Diamondback, but the heroes for hire are never officially named. Season 1 of Ironheart is then also concluded, and the biggest thing is that they actually cast Tony Stark, but only with a villain masquerading as him. In Legends of Tomorrow season 5, Vision leaves the show. Wolfie does as well, but nobody cares. The villain of the beginning of the season is Blade's daughter, Brielle Brooks, but then she joins the Legends and it's changed to the Serpent, the Asgardian god of fear, and then also a whole bunch of stuff happens, I'm sure. Because of COVID, the schedule changes a bit, and the next year of the Hawkverse happens entirely within the year 2021, starting with the Amazing Spider-Man season 7, which is potentially the worst season in the entirety of the Hawkverse. The first few episodes resolve the Mysterio story, and then we move on to the second arc, which features the Great Weaver of the Web of Life and Destiny in a villainous role. There's then an interlude in which America leaves the show, an episode focused on Anya Corazon, and an episode focused on Jean DeWolf. The third and final arc introduces Miles Morales and brings back Silk as they help Peter face off against Mr. Negative. Captain Marvel season 6 is the final season, and frankly nothing happens that is important as far as I can tell. Whenever Alex Danvers became a vigilante named Sentinel simply happens exactly the same way here. And then the series ends in an episode where most of the heroes from the show's run, although not Captain America, come together to defeat a villain named Korvac before Carol actually reveals her identity to the public. In Legends of Tomorrow season 6, Electro leaves the team, leaving just Patriot and Blade as actual Marvel characters. The main villain is Bishop, who apparently created Ava Sharp and who is apparently a robot. Ava was introduced in season 3 and becomes Sarah's primary love interest, all of which remains exactly the same, because it was all original to the series. Also the final season, Luke Cage season 4 brings Cottonmouth back to be the villain for the 3rd time, this time finally dying at Luke's hand, following which Luke retires from vigilantism yet again. Ironheart season 2 completely replaces its main character after the actress leaves the show, with a new worse character who takes up the Ironheart role, that being Ryan Wilder, with Riri Williams going missing. Beyond that, Rhodey becomes War Machine and the main villain is Madame Mask. There is also a Captain America show featuring the same actor as the Hawkverse Cap, but it was later confirmed to not be a part of the Hawkverse, so I won't be talking about it, which is the case for Fantastic Four as well, the counterpart to Stargirl. The next season begins later that year and ends in 2022, back to business as usual, although the shows are certainly dwindling. The Amazing Spider-Man Season 8 starts with some timeline-changing shenanigans in a 5-episode crossover event called Annihilation that features a younger version of King the Conqueror teaming up with the Green Goblin as the main villains, as Spider-Man teams up with a few other heroes, everyone you see on screen, and also one villain. And in one episode, the timeline change makes Norman Osborn Spider-Man and Peter the Green Goblin. The timeline goes back to normal in the end, following which there is a 2-episode interlude, one of which focuses on Miles and Silk. There is then a 6-episode arc with the Grim Reaper as the main villain, which ends with Iceman's death. Silk returns yet again for 1 episode in an interlude, which is followed by a final arc with the Master Weaver as the villain this time, working alongside the Green Goblin, who then has a power-up and becomes the Goblin King. Legends of Tomorrow ends with Season 7, which introduces another famous Marvel time traveler, Cable, but doesn't do anything with him until the end of the series, which ends on a cliffhanger with the Legends all being arrested. Yay. Ironheart ends in Season 3, which features Ironmonger as the main villain. That's all really I have to say about that. Iron Man never returns, and loose threads are never closed. Finally, by 2023, the Hawkverse has dwindled down to just The Amazing Spider-Man, and its final season, Season 9, a shorter season broken into 2 arcs, but also with a 4-episode arc in the middle that is just an interlude. Arc 1's main villain is the Iron Spider, an alternate universe version of Ryan Wilder with spider powers, but then also Ryan appears as well to help defeat her. The arc also introduces a reincarnated Iceman who's a memoryless god named Keon or something, I don't know. The interlude has an episode focusing on Anya and Jean, an episode focused on MJ and Miss Marvel, and 3 episodes in a row where Peter does not suit up in the final season. Episode 9, however, features the return of Scarlet Spider, Adam Fraction, and even Hawkeye, revealed to have become a god looking over the multiverse. The quartet face off against Carnage and defeat him. The final arc, which is 4 episodes long, focuses on the Green Goblin resurrecting his son Harry, who then becomes the Hobgoblin, as well as other villains returning like Venom, Kane, and Mr. Negative, all of whom team up against Team Spider, although they are very easily defeated. Along the way, Jean the Wolf and Keon get just as much focus as Peter. Anya and Dwayne get together, although maybe that happened in an earlier season, I don't remember. MJ gives birth to Mayday Parker, and the series ends on a shot of Peter swinging towards the camera. And just like that, the Hawkverse comes to an end, ending an 11-year run on what is possibly its very worst season, now a shell of its former self, leading to the Hawkverse and the Marvel Extended Universe, converging on mediocrity, as both are replaced by the upcoming James Gunn-led Marvel Cinematic Universe, and hopefully that will end up being a lot better than either.